Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to crumble!
I'm Joshua Kemble, and welcome to Joshua Kemble's Livestream. I've been a freelance illustrator and graphic designer for over 20 years. I was an art director for 9 years. And when I'm not art directing and working on illustrations and graphic designs, I'm working on comic books and graphic novels, and that's usually what I do during my streams. And while conversations can go all over the place on this stream, from spicy and entertaining to goofy and silly, one thing stays consistent throughout every stream. I'll always be working on art. So pull up a chair, get your art supplies out, and get ready for an entertaining show that'll keep you company while you work on your own personal art projects. This is Joshua Kemble's Art Stream. All right. Welcome to Joshua Kemble's Art Stream. I am stoked. I ordered a Team Japan, the Samurai team jersey from Temu, which is kind of cool. So it's the Otani jersey back when he was number 16, which is kind of fun as I've been delving into the world of sports in a bizarre way. So I think one of the things that helped me unlock the sports thing as like an art guy, because this is an art stream, was realizing it's just cosplay. It's just cosplay. Anyhow, okay, so here we go. I'm excited. I'm having crazy allergies this season, so if I seem like all like making weird faces like so, just know that. But we're going to work on Not Death But Love, the strange supernatural story of Elizabeth Barrett Browning on this lovely day off. 3-day weekend, which for a cartoonist means catch-up time. So let's catch up. Let's catch up on the book. So let's go to the art stream. My other camera still isn't working, so I gotta talk to Mr. Corey Kerr at some point to try to figure out how to fix that. But I have a singular camera, So we're going to rock and roll and we're going to make that happen. So what I'm going to do here is basically take these pencils for page 123 and kind of get them completed basically shading wise, which shouldn't be too bad because if you look at this page, it's actually not that complicated. It's like 3 panels. So I'm excited about this. Let me make this a little smaller too so you can see the layers and all that fun stuff. Just realized you guys may not be able to see that. Let me pull it out a little bit. Yeah, there we go. Now you can see layers. So I'm going to work on my shading layer and we're going to kind of color, well, shade this business here. So that's basically what we're going to do. Add shading, and then we'll see how the stream goes from there. Right now I'm picking a rich black, which is 50, 50, 50, 100. That's my favorite rich black. I don't know if you guys are aware of this. A lot of people don't know this. Let's talk about CMYK. Why not? So CMYK is a color palette that is basically 4 plates of color. When printing is done, it's done like on an inkjet. It's basically ink just like spitting out in dots, like a whole bunch of dots of ink. And so if you're like working in like 300 ppi, right? It's 300 pixels per inch, which means like 300. It used to be called DPI because the printing is in DPI from the PPI, weirdly enough. But the printing like if you're working 300 DPI, that means the printer is going to do 300 dots per inch. However, when you're working with offset, That works in plates of color. So a CMYK is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. It's plates of color that basically go through a printer. Each plate presses on the page, right, as it like rolls through. You guys have probably seen like old movies where they show like a newspaper room, right, and it's just like one big web printer. It's like that, but just working on singular pages that are printed in those 4 plates, and they're perfectly registered. Nowadays, a lot of modern printing is digital printing. So digital printing is just basically going to be the dots per inch again. It's just spitting ink on a page all at the same time. So like the cyan cartridge, the magenta cartridge, the yellow cartridge, and the black are going like, and following basically the channels. Let's go to this on Photoshop so you guys can see. So that's characters. Let's go to channels. So the channels are basically telling the printer like, hey, like here, I'll turn them off. Let's zoom out so you guys can see. I don't know if this is interesting to anyone, but I think knowing how things work is good. So the channels, like, so if I turn off the CMYK, let's just look at it. Okay, so when I'm going to the printer, right, the offset printer, this is the first channel is going to be just black, right? The next is going to be yellow. The next is going to be magenta, right? It's going to lay down cyan finally. And that's where you end up with a really rich black. The reason you want to do rich blacks when you're working for offset printing, which is what this book will be printed as an offset printed book, the reason you want to do rich blacks is you're basically telling the printer, not only do I want one layer of black, which is going to actually look kind of like this. Does that make sense? The black layer isn't going to look like rich black. It's just going to be black, which is kind of a gray, weirdly enough. But then I'm going to mix in 50% yellow. I'm going to mix in 50% magenta, and then I'm going to mix in 50% cyan. And now it looks much darker, much more like a true black, even though it's rich black and not true black, because true black is actually kind of ugly. So true black in printing doesn't look quite as black as rich black. So that's why, like, when I'm working on my books, I'm a big color nerd. And that's why I'm always working with rich blacks. I just realized, like I've mentioned, using rich blacks when I'm drawing or when I'm coloring, and I haven't really fully explained like why that's good. But if you've ever seen like a really nice comic or Jacob's Apartment, for instance, right, and you look in the interiors and you see, wow, that black looks really dark, right? It's because it's a rich black. It's not just black. If it were just black, it would actually look really washed out. And actually, that helps out a lot of people, I think, who are used to making art for just digital only when they go to print. A lot of young artists will get really frustrated that their black lines aren't looking quite as black as they did on the screen. And that's why you got to use rich blacks. You got to make rich black colors, which is, again, in cyan, my favorite is 50, 50, 50, 100. I know there are some printers who cannot do that, like that ink, because that's a lot of cyan, a lot of the CMY before it gets to the K, which is for black. And so that means the dry time is longer on the pages because that's a lot of ink you're spilling on the page. But if you can, and you have a printer that will accommodate, make sure you're using rich blacks. So there's that. So what we're going to do is basically just add lighting. I'm going to imagine generally my generic lighting on any page. Really, like, there's a lot of things about rendering that are important to kind of learn, but there's also really some great things about finding real fast tips to work quickly. Because a lot of us illustrators, we don't have time to like map out light sources. And so it's like being aware of how light works on objects is a huge thing. But in general, my cheat that I always use with light, unless I want specific lighting for a scene, is I will just light everything as if there's light coming from the top right of the page. And so generally that's like my default, because it's just a quick kind of approximation of a light source. So I'm imagining that there's light pouring down from the top right of this panel, and then I will kind of shade accordingly. The only times that'll change is if I have like a different light source, like especially for an outdoor scene, that works pretty well. But if I have a different light source in the image, then I'll start considering that in how I'm shading it as well. But in general, a good default is I'm just going to assume there is light coming from the top right of the page. And so what's great about that is like when I get into something like this face, and it's important when you're working in a style like I'm working in for this book, where it's kind of like more traditional illustration. It's not quite the comic book look, the way that I've been executing this book. It's got a lot more rendering, you know. And there's a reason, you know, books weren't printed with a lot of this type of rendering in comics back in the day, because the printing process has evolved quite significantly since then. But back in the day, when you had to like really worry about like very low detail, poorly registered plates that are going to print on newsprint, uncoated newsprint, you had to use these like really extreme colors. And if you got into like too much shading, like you know, it just wouldn't really read well or translate well in print. But the beauty of the modern age is that you can kind of do these more kind of traditionally rendered things and not have to worry about the printer being unable to achieve that effect. The other thing that's happened is the cost of color printing has significantly dropped as the ages have gone on. So like printing technology has gotten better. And so it's much more affordable now than it ever was to do, you know, full color printing. When I was younger, even when I published my first comic, I remember when I published Numb, it was actually, you know, before a lot of digital was available. This is like the era where a lot of artists were still transitioning to doing any art digitally at all. And I remember saving a lot of money on the print run for Numb, which was a comic I had gotten like the Xeric grant to do, which was a grant where they gave you money to print your books and get it distributed and stuff. But anyhow, so I remember the cost was significantly less because I did a 2-color job as opposed to a 4-color job. Whereas nowadays, you know, this might make me sound old, but actually quite often doing like a 2-color job is going to be more expensive than doing just web press, you know, and that's a change that just never existed when I was younger. So it's kind of a cool thing. But at the same time, you know, when we're making art for print, especially for offset print, even though like color is more affordable now, it doesn't mean when you're mixing your colors digitally that you should just go with whatever looks good. I mean, I know some people who do that, but I think that color is a tool that you have at your disposal. And so really getting into the nitty gritty of, you know, doing certain things to make sure your colors translate well are really smart, I think. Yeah. So anyhow, not that I'm not doing like heavy coloring in this book, because it's mostly flat colors with just black laid over, a rich black laid over, you know, to add different value and stuff like that. So it's going to have like kind of more of a tinted look. Speaking of, I should probably let me pull up the page we were working on. I think yesterday, I think we were working on this. And yesterday I was working on this and I said I was going to come back and finish the last 2 panels. And then I got interested in a podcast I was listening to. So instead I just finished them off screen. But anyhow, so this is via Boca de Leon, 43 Rome, and they're talking at the rooftop, and we have all of this going on. And then basically, yeah, that's what we finished yesterday. It was Sophie and Elizabeth Barrett Browning having their conversation. Yeah. Okay, so I'm basically going to just continue shading this page. How are you guys doing? If you're tuning in and watching, I'd love to hear what you're working on. If you guys watch Artcasters or used to watch 48 Hour Art Check when Corey Kerr and I did that, you're probably familiar. If you guys are watching my channel, you're probably familiar with Corey Kerr. But I would recommend that you should check out Corey's stuff. Definitely look at his Substack because he just released 5 new pages to his comic, and I'm really excited. It's an interesting story so far. It's got some bug drama. It's his story is going to be a bunch of insects, and it just sounds incredible. It's a very good hook too, and I think it's called Rage of Enlightenment rather than Age of Enlightenment, which I think is a pretty clever little play on words. But I'm very excited to kind of see what Corey does with it. He definitely started it off with like a bang and a hook. So that's pretty cool. We're getting into basically shading these panels, which again, the cool thing is there's less panels on this page. And I know some people think that, doing a splash page usually takes as long as doing a panel or a bunch of panels on a page. I disagree. I think being able to execute one singular illustration is much quicker, in my opinion, and less laborious than having to do a lot of panels on a page. That's my own opinion, but that might be also the way I'm executing the panels, because I at least in this book, I think there may be one scene where I didn't have a background in the panel. Like every panel in this is going to have backgrounds and details, and so I'm not doing a lot of the cheats that cartoonists learn and do very effectively, and sometimes to a better result sometimes, where they're using different cheats to kind of cut off areas so they don't have to draw them, or hide everything in silhouette. I'm not doing that as much with this comic. So like the idea right now of just toning 3 panels, when most of this comic has been 8, 2, 4, 6 to 9 panels. So generally like 9 or 6 panels per page is what I've been doing for the last 122 pages, with an occasional page. I think I have one page that has a full bleed picture. And then the other page, a couple other pages where it's not a lot of panels. But most of them have had a lot of panels with a lot of settings, a lot of buildings, a lot of, in the last section I just got through, there were like horses and carriages, and, it was getting kind of wild. Although those pages were a little fun in certain areas, because I definitely did a lot of the desert cheats, which, a lot of artists may not be aware, but having kind of a desert landscape or trees or something like that in the background of a comic can kind of save you a lot of time, because you can kind of fudge the details and people don't notice as much as they do in a room if a couple things kind of shift. So you don't have to be quite as accurate with your perspective or your turnarounds. Whereas with like buildings, like building interiors, room interiors, I think those take a little bit longer. And this is just speaking for me, but they take a little bit longer because, if somebody sees like a lamp on the left side of the room, and then it goes to a panel where the lamp should be in there and it just disappeared or becomes a different object in the room, I think it creates more of a break in our sense of reality when looking at the pages. That's a really long-winded way of saying I'm excited to be working on this page where it's going to be it's just less panels. So hopefully, in theory, the shading on this should take less time as well. And then when I'm using this method of shading, I'm just using the let's see, Kyle Ultimate Pencil, the hard Kyle Ultimate Pencil in Photoshop. And then I'm just kind of building from there. So the entire thing is done with that one brush, which is one of the default brushes in Photoshop. And then when I'm shading, I like to kind of do it on multiple layers, so that I can then erase out, but not have to worry about erasing, the layers underneath. So like in this case, like I'm doing this arm, I can get real dark over here, not worry about it overlapping the area that I had already colored, and then I can just erase over it without affecting the area that I just covered over, and have this nice, convincing kind of hard edge to the arm. So yeah, so today's been interesting. Fun morning. I'm definitely. It's funny. I think I mentioned this on the last show, but we went to Universal Studios with my family. I took my kid there so that he could, rock the Super Nintendo, the Nintendo world, which also speaks to the nostalgia in me because I am a sucker for Mario games. Like, I think that the era of time where I was really into gaming was like Nintendo, like the first Nintendo. And so for me, like I actually stopped owning gaming systems after Nintendo. So like I would kind of arbitrarily have experiences gaming with roommates. Like I'd have roommates who had PlayStations and stuff like that. So when the PS2 came out, this is showing you how old I am. But it's like when the PS2 came out and a lot of those games and stuff, I ended up playing through proxy just from living with roommates in college, their games sometimes. But in general, I just never purchased a gaming system after a Nintendo. And then a couple years ago, the first gaming system that I bought in years was that Nintendo emulator that just simulates a couple games, and I binged it and rebeat Final Fantasy 1 just to kind of relive the glory days of that kind of thing. But anyhow, so it is funny because my son is really into the Mario stuff, and especially a couple years back, he used to buy all the Mario Kart toys and have little Super Mario figures and different, like Luigi and Princess Peach and all these different, the Goomba toys and Bullet Bill, all those things, right? And but what's fun is like when I go to that part of Universal, it also brings up very nostalgic things for me because I'm looking around and I'm like, these are like a lot of these things are three-dimensional, kind of fun creations of worlds that where I would spend weekends, jamming on Mario 3 trying to beat it, for like a good year or two of my life. That was my game. That was like my favorite game. To this day, that is my favorite game. I think it's the best. In my opinion, I think Mario 3 might be the best. Kind of, in my opinion, that's the peak of video game design. Like, it was really cool. It was really functional. It had secrets, but it wasn't quite like like if you played one of the Zelda games, it was a little less user friendly than like Mario 3. Like Mario 3 was great because it had a lot of those secrets, like you duck behind a wall in a certain area to get a warp whistle or whatever it is, or you're on like the fire level and you run above the above the roof or whatever all the way until you get to that little warp area. But it's like those are like things that you could still beat the game without knowing. Um, yeah, and then Dylan said, "I think Universal Studios would be more my thing. They have classic monsters, Mario and Jaws. Yeah, and the fun part about that is the tour. We took my son on the Universal tour this last time, so." And again, the season tickets are pretty cheap. I will tell you, it's not a comparable park to like Disneyland. It's just not. It's not going to be comparable to like how awesome Disneyland is. Just artistically, um, even if you don't like theme parks, it's just like the Imagineering is always going to dominate. But I will tell you, like the Harry Potter area and the environment design in the Mario World area too, um, is really cool and does start kind of touching a little bit of what Disney had done so well. The one thing I'll tell you that I don't like, and I haven't been on the Jurassic Park ride yet, but we have annual passes because again we wanted to take my kid to a theme park for his birthday. And then we looked into it and it was like $10 more for annual passes. So we were just like, well, we live pretty close. It's like maybe an hour away. So we got those passes and stuff. And we've used it twice so far. So, we'll probably go again next month. But I will tell you, like the Harry Potter, like what is it called? Diagon Alley, that whole area is pretty amazing. Just like aesthetically, it's pretty cool, and it's really pretty at night. And then again, the Mario Land and the Simpsons thing was fun. Yeah, it's a pretty neat park, But it was fun to be able to this time. The first time we went, we kind of focused on a lot of rides that Ben would want to go on, and then this time around, we of course hit the Nintendo World again because Ben, that's his favorite part. And we probably rode the like Bowser ride, which is kind of fun. You go on like a Mario Kart and like shoot turtle shells at people and throw bananas and stuff. Now here's okay, so that's all kind of interesting things about Universal. Oh, I did manage to get a photograph of myself being attacked by Frankenstein's monster and the Bride of Frankenstein. And that was pretty fun. But I will tell you some of my criticisms that I think are something I see in general, and I think you'll see this at Disney a lot too. When we went on the Universal tour, I don't know if you guys have ever been on this, but it's a very iconic Los Angeles touristy thing that, almost anybody who grew up in this area has been on the Universal tour. And I got to the King Kong part and it was like a 3D glasses experience where they had like a very cool 3D movie kind of thing where like King Kong like attacks the tour bus. Well, he doesn't attack the tour bus. The tour bus gets attacked by a bunch of dinosaurs, and then King Kong like fights them and saves the tour bus. But here's the thing. So that was really cool, but when I was a kid, it was so much cooler. It's like when I was a kid on the Universal tour, you would get into one of the sets and suddenly it's New York and it's all practical effects. So it's like you're at the building tops of New York and you're hearing police sirens and there's actual like cars in there and physical things, and like there's this wafting smoke going through the building, and finally you go up to a giant animatronic King Kong that like goes and like his breath smelled like bananas, and it was like this musty like smoke and stuff, and it looked like you were kind of on a set in downtown New York, but not like on the street level, like you're actually like above it. The thing is so there's still things like that on the ride. Like for instance, I'm so glad they haven't changed the Jaws ride, right? Like where well, not Jaws ride, but the Jaws part of the Universal tour, where you go to the set they filmed Jaws at, where it like faked the ocean, and then a big cheesy animatronic shark comes out of the water, and it's all practical effects, and it still holds up and it's still fun. And they reopened the earthquake one, which is pretty cool. Paul said, "Hey, I didn't realize you were streaming." Yeah, I just started. Gary said, "Afternoon all." Afternoon, Gary. Dylan was saying things were cooler when you were a kid, but the thing is, I don't think it was cooler because I was a kid. What I'm saying is the stuff from when I was a kid that was still practical, as practical effects, even if they were corny, they just made a better ride experience than like the 3D glasses thing. I think the 3D glasses thing is like ruining rides. Like it's cool technology and it's very immersive, but it's like ruining rides at theme parks. Mr. Toad's Wild Ride is rad at Disneyland, but if Mr. Toad's Wild Ride was just me putting on like 3D glasses in a car and then trying to be convinced by 3D models and the thing moving, kind of like Star Tours or something, it's not quite as charming. And I think in rides like Star Tours, or actually like the last time I went to Disneyland, I was lucky enough to go on that like Millennium Falcon ride. Yeah, Paul said, "Nice jersey, Josh." Yeah, I got the Japan Otani jersey from when he was number 16. And then I have another jersey coming. This one was $10 on Temu. And I was like, well, I'll get that. And it's pretty legit. They have like stitched lettering and stuff. But anyhow, I have a Dodgers one coming too because I'm a nerd. I think this is part of me too. I've mentioned to you guys before, if you followed this for a while, Dylan was saying, I can understand that it would suck if it's 3D. Yeah. So it was fun. Like that part of the Universal tour was fun. But I just noticed that a lot of the rides at Universal are like, what makes them great are the practical elements of it. Like I did the Harry Potter ride thing too, and it was horrible. Like not the roller coaster. Like there's like a Hagrid's roller coaster kind of thing. That's super fun because it's like practical, but the actual Harry Potter ride was like, it was just boring. You're like floating around in this orb where they're like projecting stuff. And it's mostly like just staring at a television screen. It just didn't feel as real as the other things. I think the reason that things like Star Tours or the Millennium Falcon ride work really well with that immersive video stuff is that you're in a vehicle. And so when you're in a vehicle and it's like there's a window, it simulates it better, right? I don't know if that makes sense, but I feel like the simulation is more convincing because you don't feel like you're in a vehicle where the car is just, moving around some like in a room with like stuff being projected on the screen, because of the fact that anytime you're in a vehicle, it feels like that. Like it's like a vehicle kind of feels like that and has that natural detachment from the outer world, right? Whereas if you're in an open tram and then you're going through a tunnel where they're just projecting stuff on the tunnel and then it's like moving the tram, it doesn't work as effectively because you're kind of like, yeah, the illusion's fun and it's cool and it's amazing technology and stuff, but it's just, it isn't as immersive of an experience. So I kind of feel like I personally, I think Imagineers might be messing up by incorporating too much of that rather than just going with the classic, practical effects that I think make rides really fun. Because again, like the thing I was most excited about on that ride was when we got to the practical effects, like the Jaws ride or, actually what was cool, again, they reopened the earthquake part of it, which was something I remembered from being a kid. And, you're in a room and it's very corny, but it's like a set, of being in a subway tunnel. And then it's like a simulated earthquake with a real car and real fire that like explodes and stuff. And again, the car, when like a car comes crashing down, it's like clear that it's on a track and rigged and it's a little slower, but it it worked really well. And it was as good as I remembered it as a kid. Whereas like the stuff where you're just putting on 3D glasses and there's no practical effects, it just, I don't know. To me, that's lacking. Paul said, "I think I'd rather see a proctologist than go to Universal." Well, it's for my kid, you know. He was really into Nintendo and stuff like that. So for him, going to Nintendo World, and Nintendo World's really cool. You know, you get to go into Bowser's Castle, and I think the things they have going there that are really nice are they have these like wristbands that the kids can wear, and they do little activities, and then it unlocks like secret areas of that park that you can only get into if you like, you know, did these different almost like fair type activities, you know, with Mario props and stuff. So I don't know, it was interesting, but my point is just I think it's kind of I think that rides might be going through a similar thing to like movies, you know, where you know a lot of people went buck wild for the digital effects, and people still are. You know, there's still a ton of CG used and stuff, but Hollywood's done kind of like a big backtrack. At least Disney did, you know, with shows like Andor, where instead of being like, oh, we're gonna just digitally recreate everything, they're shooting things on sets and they're filming on location, and it's compelling, and and there's something about it that just feels more authentic than the you know the simulacra of like having everything kind of take place in this like you know weird kind of 3D environment that you it's hard to kind of fully believe. So I think rides are going to hopefully go through that where people will start you know remembering that like practical stuff is good, you know. But anyhow, so we'll see how that goes. But that was interesting to me. I think I went too dark on that in the background, and I'm also noticing I have a massive tangent there, and I think I know a way to fix it. There's a tangent, and I need to fix it. So what I'm going to do is instead widen, even though it's not accurate to the chair. I'm going to make a concession. I'm going to cheat basically and make a cheat that avoids that tangent where it goes like that instead. Still a little tangenty, but it doesn't bug me as much. There's always going to be some tangents, but man, if you can avoid them, you should avoid them. Jim was saying, don't talk back about Hollywood. We are the most authentic people. Oh, nice. Paul was saying take him to a baseball game with his scorecard, see if he's interested in scoring the game. That would be fun. Yeah, it'll be interesting. Like I'm curious how expensive it is on the off season. I know the tickets for the World Series were like there was no way. There was no way we were gonna go. I'd have to make a lot more money uh to go to a World Series game. Because I think like the nosebleed seats were like if I was gonna pay for just like me and Ben would have cost, you know, I think from what I looked into, it was going to cost at least $1,600, and I was like, "Yeah, that's not going to happen. I'm not going to pay $1,600 for a, you know." Don't get me wrong, that's really cool, and it would have been legendary to be able to witness those. But yeah, I didn't want to drop 16 grand to go to a game. Jim was saying, "Do you think Ben will be into baseball stats?" I don't think so. I don't think I'm going to get into stats. I don't know. I like baseball, but I don't know. I don't know if I'm that sold on it. But then again, I don't know. I think a year ago I wouldn't have imagined that I'd be like buying a jersey. So who knows? Um, yeah, that's the level of fandom and sports fandom that I'm never going to be able to fully get. Is the like read. I mean, I have looked at stats. Okay, when I was following the games, I was looking at stats, but not a ton. And then I was also noticing that like there's still a bunch of acronyms I have no idea what they mean. Where it'd be like pitching stats, and then it would be like the MKGB, and I'm like, the KGB, like what is this? And I like there's a lot of I think like everything in life, there's a lot of useless acronyms. That's something I've noticed going into doing education too, is there is a ridiculous amount of acronyms, man. Um, and like I think more acronyms than are useful. I don't know. I feel like acronyms should be. I feel like if somebody wanted to do a positive change in the world, it would be getting rid of acronyms for like training or procedures and stuff. Because I feel like acronyms don't help. Like it's like half the time you're using an acronym for something that has an equally short word for something that just it's standing for. You know, like I feel like a lot of the time, like workplaces and stuff will, instead of they'll, like there's a bunch of old adages, like things like be nice to people, and they'll be like BTP. You know what I'm saying? That's all. You just got to remember BTP. And you're like, the time it took you to say BTP, you could have just said, just be nice to people. Nice. Yeah, Paul said they had a good career CMYK. I guess I was just talking about career acronyms, right? At the beginning of this, because I was talking about how CMYK works. So that's pretty good. Oh, Paul, THGDTYRR. Paul said, go to a minor league game, even a high school game. Yeah, I might go to some of the high school games at the high school that I taught at. I went to one game. I went to our last football game of the year. That was pretty fun. But yeah, it'd be fun to bring Ben. I'm a little sad because we used to have a minor league team in the Antelope Valley. And now it's like a minor league like soccer team. But we did have a minor league team that like, they recruited players from like our little Jethawks team that played in the major leagues, and it was like they were called the Jethawks. And they have a stadium and stuff too. And now, like for a while, the stadium's just been sitting dead because they didn't have enough people attending to kind of justify the cost of like putting on games. But now it's soccer games, so we might end up going to some local soccer games. But I feel like, am I crazy? Like soccer is not a bad sport, but I just always find it kind of boring. But then again, I used to think that about baseball. Like on TV can be pretty boring if you haven't seen it live. So, and now I'm kind of into that. So maybe I could revisit, my World Cup kind of vibes. But the few soccer games I would watch, and maybe I'm not thinking like minor league ones either, because I would watch like the World Cup, right? And the thing I always hated about the World Cup is just like all the guys who just like fall on their leg and be like, "Ooh," and then like it'd be like a yellow flag or whatever. Or it felt like most of the game was just a bunch of dudes pretending they got hurt, laying on the ground, writhing in pain. They tapped my shoulder, and it's like a yellow flag. I don't know. That's what it felt like. Dylan said, I'm thinking of creating a little mascot for my channel for a returning character or something like that. Fish Wizard shall be the character. I like that. I like a fish wizard. That sounds pretty awesome. All right. We're getting there, guys. We're almost through this panel. And what's great is, yeah, like once I'm done with this panel, I think we'll probably put on a trailer of some kind. I don't know why, but this is my brain, right? Earlier today, I was, thinking about uh, trying to remember the difference between ontology and teleology again, because it's been a while. And then I probably spent maybe an hour kind of reminding myself what teleology is. And what's funny is after reading through it, I mean, the gist that I got about teleology, like the words teleology, are that, it's kind of like a reason behind something, right? So like the word teleology is is like if I planned to do a graphic novel and then I did a graphic novel and then somebody found the graphic novel, the teleology of the graphic novel would be me planning to do it and how I executed it and made it happen. So it's like the kind of process by which, things happen, but it's not the physical process, it's the why. It's not the it's not like the how, it's the why. It's like, why did I decide to do a graphic novel? Or material sciences are going to look into like how a teapot boils, but teleology gets into like, what's the person boiling water for? Are they making tea? Like the function, like what the purpose of the scientific thing is. So anyhow, I was trying to remember that. That's the best I can grasp of it. But then the thing that's annoying about terms like that is I'll kind of grasp it and feel like I've got it, and then there'll be like examples, and there's like 4 where it's completely outside of the understanding or even the explanation they're giving it. I'm like, are you guys just making things up? Thomas said, that's why I like watching women's soccer. Those girls are vicious. I will tell you, women's soccer is a fun sport to watch. I had a lot of friends in high school who were on the women's soccer team when I was in high school, and it was fun to go to those games. They get vicious. But anyhow, so I do wish we still had that minor league team here. It would have been fun to get because that's like really affordable too. So we could have gotten season tickets, especially now that I know like Ben kind of liked watching it. It would have been a nice little father son thing. But maybe there's a close minor league around. Paul said, new game, figure out TDYGHTYRR. What that stands for. I don't know. Am I alone in that? Like, I want to know, chat. Am I alone in the kind of utter disgust and annoyance at acronyms? Like, I kind of hate them. And they don't help me remember. In fact, quite the opposite. They make it harder for me to remember what the acronym's standing for, because I'll remember what it's about, but then I'll start getting confused because I'm trying to remember the acronym rather than the concept that it's standing for in the first place. And so it becomes this kind of, I think that would be a good Star Wars plot. They should bring that into Andor. They should have, because they have like pencil pushers in that show, right? For the Empire. One of the things the Empire should have is like, the pencil pushers at the Empire should have like catchy acronyms for everything. Like, I don't know if I ever caught that in Star Wars, in the Star Wars universe, where like the Empire would totally be all about those acronyms. Like imagine on the Death Star, all the motivational posters, and all the acronyms, where it's like, guys, when you're dealing with a giant space laser, you need to TPYZ, don't forget to TPYZ, and you'll have the guy like running the laser who's like, what does that stand for again? I can't. And then like some, nepotistic boss who will come by and be like, no, what TPYZ stands for is this. And it's like, okay, cool. Jim said, Paul, I'd like to double down. You know what? I think that would be funny. What about a game show where you double down on horrible claims, where it's like, I don't know, simulating debate or something. Where it's like, would you like to double down on that claim, sir? Gary said, okay, confessing my digital artist sin, the way you feel about acronyms is how I feel about shortcuts. I don't find 95% of them faster than doing it normally. I refuse to use most. Are you talking about shortcuts on the keyboard? Because if you're talking about shortcuts on the keyboard, you're a lunatic. if you're going to the file, and not using shortcuts, I criticize you heavily, sir. And I'm like a boomer when it comes to digital work. And if you actually mean those shortcuts, you're pretty incredible with your stuff, Gary. Like, Gary can do 3D modeling and all sorts of wild stuff that I don't know if I can do. No, you use the menu? No, because that has a function, my dude. Like, a good example, like, just, the move tool, right? I mean, just doing this would take me like 10 minutes, and all I have to do is just hold the space bar, to basically go from like the eraser tool to the paint tool. Oh, that's a fair point. Jim was saying DVSM is an acronym. That's the truth. See, I think that's why you wouldn't like shortcuts, Gary. You created an acronym. You know what, though? That's one of the contexts where I feel like that's okay. Like, if it's an acronym for like a team or a book or something like that, it doesn't bug me like an acronym for like an important procedure. I think with important procedures, it bugs me because it's like it gets in the way of learning it. Acronyms in a crowd of 4 or more people is authoritarian. It's fascist. I agree. Look, guys, there's other politics out there. There's political movements out there. Let's start the anti-acronym party, okay? And we'll call ourselves the AA for short. That's true. Gary is gorgeous American ripped youth. That's true. I think just the term ripped as in fit in an acronym is pretty funny. I know that like Gary tends to have this habit, like this happened at the art meetup too, where Gary would like shake your hand and like shake it like super hard, like squeezing your hand and be like, "Do you even lift, bro?" That's Gary. That's all. I mean, that's Gary all the time. Or he'd be like, "Hey, can you check out my piece of art right there? The one right there. Yeah, it's right over there. Yeah, right there." Yeah, acronym AA. My name is Paul, and I hate acronyms. I like that, Paul. Dylan said that's like Flat Earth Twitter saying we have members all around the globe. Okay, that's, you guys do remember that, right? I think most of you guys were there when we were watching, when I was going on my Flat Earth kick, my Flat Earth arc, where I was watching Flat Earthers get destroyed in debates. And remember when we had that moment where we realized collectively that people who are flat earthers don't use the word globe. And they actually don't use the word sphere either. So they'd be like, Yeah, man. It's because of the degradation of the atmos. You know what I mean? And somebody would be like, atmosphere? No, atmos, bro. Atmos. The hemis. All over the hemis, you guys. Dylan said a flat earth arc, Joshua. I just found it really fascinating to watch. I this is one of the things like that maybe this makes me a terrible human being. I find it fascinating sometimes to just watch someone with really weird beliefs just double down and and to hear their kind of their justification for it can be really entertaining. It can be because it's like it's hard. You know what? It's not even entertaining. It's like fascinating. Like I don't get it. I don't. There are certain beliefs that I just like. They go beyond uh, stretching the imagination and just like there's a certain level of denialism that's like really it's hard to turn away from. It's like a car crash, you know. Jim said at the cabin while we were creating, Gary was creatine. He just had lines of creatine across the table. He's like, "Oh man," we were like, "Are you doing?" He's like, "No, it's creatine, man." Gary said it's all true. That man is jacked. A lot of people don't realize that they've seen, Mr. Hodges on screen, and they don't quite realize the dude is like a tank in person. And for some reason, he says bro like all the time. He's like, bro, are you saying that, bro? What are you doing, bro? What you drawing? Are you drawing? Are you going to draw like that, bro? Anyhow, okay. Dylan said the stoned ape theory is a fun theory. Okay. Dylan, you can't say something like that without expositing what is the stoned ape theory. I don't know if I've heard this one. Maybe I've heard it and I just haven't heard it in that phrase, but explain the stoned ape theory. Paul was saying Atmos flat. No, it was funny because like I was watching, this was a while ago, but we were watching some debates with flat earthers. And it was like about 5 minutes in that I kept hearing the guy just say Atmos over and over again. And then I was like, I was just thinking it was such a strange thing to say Atmos, because I was like, why not just finish the word? And then because I'm kind of slow and not the most intelligent person on the planet, it took me a few minutes. And then I was like, oh, because it's sphere, because they can't say sphere. That was just the funniest little detail to me. Like that would be the hard kind of thing to make up if you're writing fiction. Like if you're writing fiction, if you were writing a fictional character that believed in a flat earth, would you know that they wouldn't use the word sphere? like it's hard to even make that up. That's amazing. Oh, okay. Dylan said that the idea of apes kind of yeah. Okay, I have heard that theory. Yeah, there are people who believe that fungi is why we evolved the way we did, and so there's a theory that early mankind basically took a bunch of mushrooms and started seeing things, and it expanded their consciousness or whatever to where we now have rational belief. Paul was saying, you're scribbling all over your text. I know. That's why I'm doing it on different layers so I can erase the scribbles. Dylan said on the show Inside Job, they play with the stone to ape theory. I think it's an interest, I don't know. Like, I'm not a big druggie, okay? Like, I had my time when I was a young man doing, silly things. But it's like I'm not really big on the expanding consciousness thing. I don't know, maybe it does. I feel like maybe this is another idea. Maybe you could just do, like, if you're going to do something like that, maybe you should do it for fun. Not, I don't know. That's a wild idea. Not to like expand your view or anything like that, just for fun, That's hot take, okay? Hot take there. I think sometimes, this is my own opinion, okay? I think sometimes people get really weird into the like all like natural obsession with like things that are organic or natural. And I think sometimes people will forget that like a lot of poisons are organic and natural. Okay, let's see here. We're going to call this shading. Paul said he's been on an acid trip since 1983. Okay, guys. We're an hour in. We're going to do more, but I did finish one panel. So we're going to get into 2 panels in a second. But I'm happy with how this is coming out. Dylan said Gwyneth Paltrow is screaming right now. She's like, no! It's the shot from Star Wars of Darth Vader, like, no! I didn't even realize because I have a rolly chair I can do that. So if somebody ever says something in chat that I don't like, I can just be like, no! That's amazing. All right, guys. I will be right back. Here is the trailer. Let's do Frank's Adventures at the Library. I'll be right back. This is Frank Salazar's commercial. If you are out there and you want me to play a promotion for you, make a minute or a minute and a half max video where you mention Jacob's apartment or 2 stories. And you can also throw in anything about your own channel or your own work in this video. And as long as it's, user friendly and it follows the TOS of YouTube, I will add it to the rotation of videos on my channel. Okay, here is Frank's Adventures at the Library.
Our heroic adventurers fought orcs, monsters, sorcerers, necromancers. Now they find themselves in front of a mystical library. What shall they find? It's all in the roll of the dice. We've come this far. There's great power behind this door. I can feel it. We just have to get past it. This door is no match for my axe. I shall chop it down. You always want to use brute strength. Why don't you try knocking? We'll try it your way. You may enter. The library is open to all those who seek knowledge. Feel free to look through our tomes. Maybe you'll find the answers you seek. I sense great power here, and it's behind those shelves. Indeed, there are powerful items hidden behind these shelves, but you can only get there through the enchanted words. Do you have those words? I believe I do.
Tremble before the Cremble.
There is great power. Look at that glove. must be so powerful. That is not where I sense this power. I must get closer. I found them. I found these sacred manuscripts written by Joshua Kemble. Behold, I now possess 2 stories and Jacob's apartment. Please tell us more about 2 stories and Jacob's apartment, and who is Joshua Kemble? Xeric Award-winning cartoonist Joshua Kemble is a freelance artist, graphic designer, and author. 2 Stories is a confessional graphic memoir that grapples with questions of faith, mental illness, depravity, and ultimately redemption in a fallen world. Jacob's Apartment is a coming-of-age graphic novel in the vein of Ghost Road and Fun Home. It weaves together the threads of spiritual faith, identity, purpose, love, and loss to create an engrossing world in which waking and sleeping dreams collide. You have made your choice. The passage is now closed. Wait, can I get that glove? No. Oh. All right, let's go.
Dylan caught me in my hypocrisy, and he said TOS is another abbreviation. Thanks to Frank Salazar for making that awesome thing. I feel like that one was incredibly rad. Incredibly rad. Oh, man. Okay, the thing I also like about Frank's trailer, other than the amazing stop motion in it, it made my day when he made it. But it's also nice because it's a bit longer. And so when I have a break like the one I just had where I wanted to heat up a little bit of coffee, it buys me just enough time to go get coffee, but also keep things kind of running and interesting. All right. So we're going to get into this, guys. You guys, okay? Here's what we're doing, you guys, okay? Out of curiosity, would you guys listen to this if that's how I talked the entire episode, where I was just like, hey guys, so here's what's gonna happen. So you guys, I'm in a goofy mood, okay? I'm in a goofy mood. Jim asked how far along I am on my book. I know it seems like I've been saying this forever, but I'm at about the halfway point. I'm a little over the halfway point, but not much. I'd be like, if you're in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean swimming, and you look, and it looks like you're kind of in the middle, but you're like a couple swims away from the middle. But what's cool, and this is the exciting part, actually, is I'm 2 pages away from doing the longest comic that I've ever done. And so I'm pretty excited about that. Like, that's an achievement, okay? If I had, I had like this voice modulator thing a while ago that was fun, that had like cheesy sound effects. And then it didn't really work too well, and it caused all these glitches with the audio, so I don't use it. But if I had like a like a shock jock, DJ ability, I'd have an audience go, yay, there. But I feel good. I feel good about it. Jim said, keep swimming. We're here to power you along. I love it. And I'm here to power you guys along. It's the art slog is the slog, man. The biggest trick in life, I think, is just doing the work, and kind of fearlessly so in the face of the odds. I think that's why it was fun to watch baseball, weirdly enough. Man, like, what I think one of the things that got me into it was realizing, like, this is something these people have done their whole life, right? And in the face of tremendous odds, ended up coming out as experts in the thing they're doing. And, there is something about humans doing things And it's like, why are they doing it? Is a good question. You know, like, what is the point of a sport? It's sheer entertainment and then just seeing human achievement for the sake of human achievement. And I think that's going to be really important for us as we start heading into AIville, where, you know, lawyers and dentists are going to be able to, with a decent amount of cash, but less cash than it would have cost them to hire an illustrator or an artist, will be able to just type in prompts and make something passably good. Jim said, "We are fungus bros." I know how that feels like a long journey. Gary was saying we should watch Moneyball if I haven't already. It's a great movie. Moneyball's the best. Is that the movie with am I crazy? That's the one with Michael Keaton, right? Where the insane asylum, he takes him to a game, or am I thinking of a different? Describe it, Gary. But if that's the movie, I know that movie I watched a whole bunch, like a good chunk of my life. But I don't. Now that I'm saying that, it doesn't sound like the right name. So Gary, you gotta expand on your statement there. Is that Moneyball? Is that the Keaton one, or was that a different one? Oh, he said Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill. Okay. I'll have to check that out. That sounds pretty cool. What was the one I'm thinking of? What's the Michael Keaton one? Mixed Nuts was the one I was thinking of for some reason. Mixed Nuts is a great baseball movie, I think. Field of Dreams was a good movie. It is a good movie. I've brought up Field of Dreams to I haven't seen that in years. But I cannot think, as corny as that movie was and overrated and stuff, it's one of those things where as cheesy as that is, I think that movie is a good analogy to like the human condition, where you kind of just have to have faith in whatever it is you're doing. He said it's about when the Oakland A's started using sabermetrics to win despite having no budgets. Nice. I know Mr. Kevin Cross is a big A's fan, or was in his youth. Kind of understandable if you're like an 80s kid and you're around in Oakland. How could you not be an A's kid? Kind of like when I was a kid, pre like giving up on being interested in sports. How could anyone in the 1980s as a kid not have been obsessed with the Dodgers? Like, we were amazing, you know? Like, again, it was like this peak time. Jim said Bad News Bears is a good one. Nice. I'm going to have to check that out. Moneyball sounds fun. I think I can't remember. What was the movie with there was another really good one with Kevin Costner where he plays like a pitcher. You guys remember that one? I can't remember the name of it, but it was pretty good as well. My favorite baseball related movie, though, this is one of my favorite stupid movies, okay? I don't think this movie is a good movie by any means, okay? I want to clarify that. But I will say, as a young man, early in college, we used to watch Basketball, which is by Trey Parker and Matt Stone. Like, we used to watch that nonstop. Like, it's a very dumb comedy. And I still, to this day, love it. That is a very dumb movie. It's so good though. I want to watch it again. It'd be fun to see. I wonder if it holds up. I'm sure it's very politically incorrect. But there's a recurring bit in that movie that I love where there's like a villain character who's like a rich guy who's trying to buy out the sport. And there's this like actress lady, I can't remember, is one of those, sex pot type people, cast in this role who like the villain is always kind of flirting with her. So he'll say things like like he's talking to her in his hotel room and he goes, maybe you could come by later and buff my lobby. And then like, so the movie will continue for like 10 or 15 minutes and then it pans back and she's got like a floor buffer and is literally buffing this lobby. Like, and then it's like, there's so many stupid things like where I think the same bit recurs where he does the same thing and he goes, maybe you could come by and like polish my knobs. And then again, it's like, 10 minutes later in the movie, they go back to the scene and she's like, like polishing the doorknobs and it's the stupidest bit. I love that movie, but it's got a very funny recurring bit in it. Trey Parker and Matt Stone are very funny. Okay. They're funny people. Inappropriate sometimes, yes, but very funny. Paul said, gotta run. Have a good one, y'all. Yeah, I feel like Field of Dreams is like it's just a good analogy. Like the movie's an analogy of like the human condition of, and it's very over the top, but I remember, well, it's been a long time since I've seen it. So I gotta be careful here. Maybe I'll rewatch it. Like I saw it as a kid. And I think the last time I saw it was probably like in my teens. So I say this lightly, okay? But from what I recall, and it would be fun to rewatch, but I feel like the whole message of the movie, even though it's very sappy, is the idea that, believing in a dream, and then kind of like at the cost of everything, pursuing that dream with the belief that if you build it, they will come, kind of thing. It's very meaningful, I think. It's a very meaningful thing. Nice. Gary said Moneyball also works if you don't know much about baseball. It's just a good think outside the box and find your own path type of movie. Dylan said, have you seen Evolution? I don't think so. I mean, I know at the Galapagos you can see that if you wanted to. Are you talking about seeing live Evolution before my eyes? I know you're not. I'm being goofy. I'm here all day, guys. I'm here all day. I didn't like that the lighting wasn't working so much on that hair. Over her. What is evolution though? You got to explain that. Not the word with the movie. All right, guys. All right. I like movies that here's the thing that I've learned too in life. The most fascinating conversations you're ever going to get in with anyone as an adult are usually going to be with somebody who's really into something. And quite often it kind of doesn't even matter if it's something you're into. If they're like really geeky about it, generally that's like very addictive. I think passion goes a long way. So like if a movie is well written, it's not going to matter if it's about a topic you could care less about that. You could care less about, right? Oh, okay. Interesting. You said that it's about an alien coming to Earth who then evolves and takes over the Earth. Okay. Sounds cool. Sounds like an interesting flick. So what I'm working on now is just kind of shading this second panel. And I'm excited because I'm going to keep going until I shade the third panel. The thing I have on the dock for the day is basically I need to finish this. And once I'm done with this, I'm going to do some client revisions off stream of some robot illustrations. I know it's a sad day where you have to draw robots. I don't know if this happened years ago. Like there was a client I had. What was his name? Rich. It's been like 10 years, so I can't remember. His first name was Rich, but he was like an MMA champion, one of the early MMA champions. And I remember he was doing a project with the disabled American veterans as like a fundraiser, and they hired me. I used to do a lot of work for the disabled American veterans and I'd do it at like a much lower rate than I usually would freelance for because it's just a good cause, you know. It's like it sucks for like people who went to war and then they come back like disabled and they don't get a lot of services and stuff. So I was like always like whenever I could do stuff for the DAV, which were one of my clients, like a really strong client of mine for, you know, probably about a decade. But anyhow, I remember this one day, this is back when I was just freelancing and that was it, you know, where I had to watch like 20 MMA fights to draw to find like references and stuff to draw for this guy's like shirt for his like shirt art and for the disabled American veterans. And I remember having this moment, and these happen to me every once in a while, you know, doing commercial art, where I had this moment where I was like, dude, I'm getting paid to watch fights and like draw like somebody like fighting. Like this is weird. Like this is a weird job. It's a weird career. It's pretty fun at times. So I have a similar thing with this project that I'm working on for this client that I've been doing a lot of covers and art for, where it's like there's every once in a while there's like a surreal moment of like this is kind of weird and cool that that you know I'm getting paid to draw robots. Like that's pretty awesome because I draw robots for free all the time. Like I love drawing robots. They're one of my favorite things to draw, you know, the vintage kind of retro robots. If you sat me down in a room with like a piece of paper and said, draw anything you want to draw, there's a really high chance that one of the things would be a robot, a retro robot, you know? Just love the things. I love drawing them. They're fun to draw. They're aesthetically pleasing. So anyhow, that was a nice thing. But anyhow, yeah, there's every once in a while there's those moments, you know, in art where you're like, this is kind of a cool job, you know? There's definitely moments like any job where you're like, this is kind of a horrible job. Dylan said, I have a wind-up robot that's modeled after them. That is one of those things, you know, there's weird things that people collect that I don't understand, you know? But if I were really wealthy, I think I could see myself definitely buying way more guitars because I love guitars and I can understand that collection. Another thing I can totally understand is like antique, you know, tin toys. Like, I think those are amazing. I can definitely see why people like collect like original, you know, tin robots and like Ultraman and, you know, that kind of stuff. I can see why people get into collecting those things. So I think sometimes, like, you know, and this, I think this just goes for anyone, but sometimes I will catch myself being like really critical of people who are super wealthy, you know, where I'm like, well, why would they spend their money on this? You know, they could be spending it on something more important. Then I have to remember my own little weird things that I would probably end up buying if I had like unlimited resources, you know? All right, let's see here. I think at this age, I'd probably be much more responsible with my, you know, income were I to make it, you know, big and probably not buy a bunch of stupid stuff. But you never know, you know, you really do never know. Out of curiosity in chat, what are some kind of frivolous things that you find yourselves purchasing or or trying not to purchase? Do you guys have anything like that? Like The Thing, you know, where you're like, man, I gotta not get another one of these fill in the blank, and then you do. I'm always kind of interested in that too, like people's obsessions. Like, do you guys collect anything weird? Do you have any weird collections that fit in with the YouTube TOS? Because I just realized some goofball out there might be like, well, I collect corpses. Nice. Dylan said, I've been trying to collect pieces for my favorite IPs like Jurassic Park, Godzilla, Ultraman, Universal Monsters. Want to keep the things to a minimum. Yeah, so if you're into that, there is a lot of merch at Universal Studios for sure of the Universal Monsters. What was it I was reading about the other day? Oh, it was about Bela Lugosi. I believe was the first person offered Frankenstein and then turned it down. It was interesting. I just never had thought of Bela Lugosi being the yeah. Gary said he said the only dumb thing I'm buying right now is Super 7 Ultimates GIJoe figures. They're 6 inches based on the cartoon series. Like the original, like the OG GIJoes. That sounds kind of awesome. Who was your favorite GIJoe, Gary? Who was your favorite? I know it's weird, but like when I was a kid, this is the weirdest part. When I was a kid, all my friends were into Snake Eyes. I thought for the toys, I just thought Falcon was the coolest one because he had a sidearm, and that was really cool to me. And he also had that green beret, which looked like he looked all smooth and cool. And I was like, that's one smooth operator. So yeah, that was my favorite. Plus, he was gonna shotgun people. You know what I mean? Like he's gonna rock your world with a shotgun. Gary said Flint looked cool too. Yeah, 100%. Zartan? What about Zartania? You know what I'm saying? Have I told you guys my Zartania story? I gotta hear in the chats whether I've said it or not, because I don't want to regale you with a story I've already told. Have I told you my Zartania story? I thought it was Zartania. Maybe I'm forgetting. I thought he had like a sister character. Am I crazy? Now I'm looking it up to see if I got that right. Maybe I'm thinking of the wrong character. Okay, I'm looking it up. I found it. Oh, it was Zorana. I'm sorry, Zorana. I was thinking Zartania. Zorana. Yes, his punk sister. Okay, so have I told you my Zorana story? I thought it was Zartania, but it's Zorana. I just looked it up because I was like, that doesn't sound right. So it's Zorana. Okay, so here's my Zorana story. So when I was a kid, I got Zartan and Zorana. And I used to, like, in the backyard play GIJoes because, like, you could, like, turn on the hose and, like, fill an area with, like, so it's like a, you know, a, like, swampy area they're playing in, and, like, they're fighting a war, right? And it was like I can make, like, a little miniature environment for them to all be battling in, you know, like mini trees and, you know. Anyhow, so I would do that, and then I'd get my GIJoes, you know, and bring them inside, you know, make sure I cleaned off the muck from them if they got dirty, because I was one of those weird kids who took care of my toys. I was never one of those weird, like, blow up your toys, melts together parts of your toys guys. And I still, to this day, if I see a kid do that, it makes me so mad. Like, it just brings up, like, bad memories, like the kids who would do that. So I would take pretty decent care of my toys, like put them away and stuff like that. I cared about these things, you know, I was going to play with them. The only times I'd ever do anything like strange was if the rubber band in the middle of the GIJoe snapped, then I would keep those snapped parts of the GIJoes as like body parts on the field. So anyway, so Zorana, was one of I had just gotten those toys. I brought them out in the backyard, go out, play this awesome epic battle, you know, with Zorana and Zartan, and like they're out there just rocking, like they're just amazing toys, like great. They're having a great time in this battle that I'm inventing as a kid. So I go back inside, I clean up all the stuff, I put away my GIJoes, I think nothing about it. And then, about 2 weeks later, I get out my GIJoes to play GIJoes again, and I go, where's Zorana? I'm like, So then I go in the backyard, and I find that I had left Zorana out in the backyard for 2 weeks, and she had changed color. And I was horrified. I was heartbroken. I was like, oh my gosh, she changed color. My toy is destroyed. Anyhow, turns out that this particular toy, I think, was actually designed to change colors. So once it was back inside, it like changed back. But like the skin had changed color, and I was like, no! I thought I ruined it. Anyhow, so there you go. Dylan said, I remember having an Invisible Woman toy in the early 2000s. She was so cool. I feel like that could be a joke easily, where you're like, yeah, I had an Invisible Woman toy. I could never find her. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, guys. That was bad. That was bad, bad, bad. All right. So, anyhow, I just remember being a little sad about that. All right. You know what I want to watch again that I haven't rewatched in about 10 years? I rewatched it in my 30s, and I thought it was interesting. It was the GIJoe movie, you know? Where I rewatched the original Transformers animation and the animated movie, and I was like, this holds up. Like, that movie is good. I can see why, as a kid, when Optimus Prime was turning into a discolored dead bot, why I was in tears in the theater as a kid. Because I was like, this is pretty powerful. Like, this is a pretty good animation. Still holds up. And then I remember rewatching GIJoe the movie and being like, meh. So now I'm curious. I don't know. I'd be curious. Yeah, so Gary said, yes, both Zartan and Zorana turned blue in the sun. That's the thing. So she had changed color, and I was like, I didn't know that she changed, and I thought I had ruined my toy. I was just like, I was so upset. I thought the color had somehow, because I had left her out for, 2 weeks. And I was pretty little at that time, too. So I believe there were actual tears in this scenario. I think I was crying over those toys. Like a little man, baby. Yeah. And then it turned back, and then I remember one of my friends being like, yeah, they're supposed to do that. And I was like, oh. So, yeah. Jim said, you're too young for the $6 million man toys, right? Yeah, 100%. Not for the reruns. I think Gary wouldn't be too young for that. I think Gary would be about the right time, right place for that. All right. I'm going to merge this down. You guys, we have finished one more thing here. Oh, that's a problem. Does she have like a disease on her forehead? No. I just messed up on the shading. Got to fix that up. Boy. All right, here we go. We've got we got this. All right. Voila, ladies and gents. From what I understand from the chats, I think mostly gents. Okay, we've finished 2. That means it's time for another trailer. All right, here we go. I'm going to put on Home Shopping Kemble, and I will be right back, and we'll finish this up.
Well, thank you, Colleen. I hope your daughter Kelly does well at North Carolina State this year. Well, we got another caller on the line. Elizabeth from Phoenix, Arizona. Elizabeth, what can we do for you? Are you ready to do some shopping, girl?
Oh, yes, Terry. I am ready to do some shopping today. I'm interested in that 2-book set you have. 2 Stories and Jacob's Apartment.
Oh, well, that's a great choice.
In fact, I bought these books before. I gave a set to my grandson Hunter. These books are amazing.
Well, they sure are, and if you buy both of them, you really get the whole feel of the whole Joshua Kemble universe. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do, Terry. These books are remarkable because, for one, you can take them anywhere. You could put them in your car, and you can go to the park or the river. We've gone to the river. My husband Taylor and I, we just love it. And I murdered my husband at the river. Yeah, I did. But these still are amazing books.
So the thing that speaking of toys, this is a good conversation. We're gonna do this. I'm gonna get nostalgic here, okay? So, full disclosure, I was a pretty poor kid. Like we were, my family was not super well off when I was little, and so we actually lived with my aunt for a while because we couldn't afford a house and then from there we like moved to like a 2-bedroom apartment, like family of 5 kind of thing. Anyhow, because of that, when I was a kid, I didn't get a lot of the cool toys that a lot of other kids got. And I remember I'd like stay the night at a friend's house or something, and they'd have like the full Voltron, and I'd be like, how is this possible? Like, how do you have the full Voltron? I can't even get one, and they'd have like the full Voltron. Anyhow, so story on that. A lot of my GI Joes were like hand-me-downs, or they were given to me like for like a birthday present from like a friend from school or something. Cause like, dude, I remember at the time, cause we were pretty poor. So I think buying actual GI Joes was like expensive. And then we're a big family. So I think that was part of it too, right? Where it's like, I think if you're an only child, like my son, like we're not super loaded, but he has more toys than I think most kids should, but it's partially because he's our only kid, so like, of course he's getting all the toys, like he's our primary expense, as a kid. But anyhow, so, I remember staying the night at a friend's house, and everybody knew this kid in the neighborhood. This is back in the 80s when people would like hang out like with their neighborhood friends. Like you'd have friends, you'd be friends with your neighbors, and like, yeah, it's kind of a weird time. Think like E.T. if you guys aren't, imagining this, but it's like that era where, me and the neighbors, we'd like play street hockey, or we'd like, like bike around town and like get up to shenanigans. And then like, there was basically like a rule, like you would check back in, if you weren't dead at a certain point of day. Anyhow, so, I remember there was this one kid on our block who like was an only child, and this poor kid, man. And I was not a good friend to this kid either, but this poor kid, like most kids on the block would hang out with him because he had every Nintendo game. Like he had all the Nintendo stuff. He had the Power Glove. He had the, like the mat, like there was this like floor mat for the Olympics game. And he had the full Voltron. He had all the toys and stuff. So that's kind of why a lot of us would hang out with him, was like he had cool toys and like he had all the Nintendo games. Anyhow, I remember one time going over to his house, and under his bed, like shoved under there, like it barely fit, was the freaking aircraft carrier. Like he had the G.I. Joe spaceship, but not only that, he had the aircraft carrier. There's like no one on Earth who had the aircraft carrier. He had the full aircraft carrier. And I remember this being one of the first times where like I didn't really notice too much being poor as a kid. There's a few things that made me realize I wasn't like in the same class as like most of my classmates. And one of them in this scenario was like, he was asking me about my GI Joes, and I'm like, well, I got this airplane thing from, basically like a thrift store. So it was missing all the decals and stuff, and like he's like, why don't you guys buy more vehicles? And I'm like, I don't know. I got a Jeep and an airplane, man. That's all I got. Okay. Anyhow, my point is, I just remember being mystified because I was just like mind blown when I saw that he had the aircraft carrier. I was like, nobody has this. This is the aircraft carrier. And he was like, yeah. and I remember being like, you must be like playing with this every day. Like, this is the coolest thing ever. He's like, man, it's all right. And it was the same with this Voltron, where it's like he had the full Voltron, and like it would just be like tossed in the corner, just like whatever. Yeah, it's a thing I have. And I remember that being like a thing where I was like, he doesn't seem like. I remember that being one of those moments of realizing like wealth doesn't necessarily buy happiness, because here was a kid with like all the toys everybody wanted at the time. He had the full GIJoe, like not GIJoe, the whole Star Wars set. And I had one Star Wars toy as a kid, which was it was a sand person. That's it. That's the only Star Wars toy I was able to have as a kid. And here's the guy. He had every single cast member of Star Wars. He had like the freaking Ewok village, the Jabba palace, all of this stuff. And he had a Rancor. It's like, it was so cool. And yet he barely touched any of them, and he was just like, meh. And I remember thinking, that's funny, because I seem happier with my like 2 toys than he seems with his like million toys, So anyhow, I just thought, I remember that being like a realization where it was like, oh, money doesn't seem to bring happiness. Like, this kid has these things that I wanted, and he doesn't seem like too stoked on it. Doesn't even seem to appreciate what he has, It was just a moment, because I was like, man, you must be, because in my head I had seen the commercials where they showed the aircraft carrier, and also I remember the spaceship being like, man, that's the coolest spaceship. And yeah, I just realized like this kid plays with his stuff less than I do, because he just has it all, Jim said Josh's friend was named Little Jeffrey Bezos. What happened to that guy? Anyhow, okay, other time, just because I'm rambling here. The other time I realized that I wasn't as wealthy as other kids was we would get our shoes like knockoff shoes. Like I remember in elementary school getting knockoff shoes, and I didn't know they were knockoff shoes. I was pretty happy with my shoes until I remember for like an entire year, classmates making fun of me because I was wearing Payless shoes, and I remember being like, oh, these aren't, because I think at the time they were called Pro Wings was the brand, was Pro Wings. I can't remember, but anyhow, the point being, they weren't LA Gear. They weren't like the cool shoes. And I remember people like teasing me for it and being like, that's weird, because they just seem like shoes. But I think for like years after that, when I used to always, like, I've never been a fashion guy, but I think because of residual feelings from that, I used to always spend a little bit more money on my shoes, It's an interesting thing where it's like, man, kids sometimes can just be like little turds. Like, I keep worrying for my kid too, that he's going to come across that, and it's like, who cares, But yeah, I remember that being a thing. What else was another one? Another one was Jokelys, because at the time Oakleys were like the cool sunglasses when I was a kid. And this is like, early 90s, late 80s. So it's the Oakleys that had the little V on them. So you could like change out, the lens. Now the only people you see wearing these are usually like deer hunter types, like people who are going to be going on a hunt for deer, or cops. Like, cops still rock these kind of Oakleys. I think they kind of came back in fashion a couple years back when everybody was, for some reason, bringing back all the neons and stuff from the 80s, which to me was something I didn't want to see resurging. But anyhow, yeah, that was another one where I remember that my glasses, I got a pair of Jokeles and they looked exactly the same. And people were like, this clown here in his Jokeles. Yeah. Good times. But yeah, it's funny how like class divides. I don't know if I'm crazy here, but I feel like class divides really do start growing like in that weird era of, you know, elementary school where like trends are like everything, you know? All right. We're getting there, guys. I actually like this panel a lot. I like my low angle here to build some drama. Dylan said the things I hate that came back are mullets and Crocs. Oh man, I've told you guys about the tiara mullet, right? There's when I was younger in this valley, there was a place called Schooners. It still exists. It's like a bar out here, but it was like a country bar, you know? And they'd have a thing called Battle of the Bands. And we were playing gigs there. It was one of the few venues you could play locally here, you know, and you'd compete, and then whoever won would win like money and a gig or something. And so we'd always play Battle of the Bands, but I remember the guy who was judging Battle of the Bands had a mullet that I've never, like, it almost was like Tiger King level type mullet where his mullet kind of turned into, it was like shaved and buzzed and then back in the back. And then at the front, he had like left spikes and bleached them. So it kind of looked like he was wearing a tiara. And we used to call him Tiara Mullet. And we played a gig there at this like kind of, you know, bar. And the people who always won were like hair metal bands. Like they'd be, you know, covering like hot hair metal hits. And I remember we opened a show playing Frère Jacques, but like a hardcore, like Frère Jacques dormez-vous, like that kind of thing, as a joke, kind of making fun of the type of bands that would win the Battle of the Bands at this venue. And I remember we got our scorecard back because, you know, it was a Battle of the Bands. So there's like judges and a scorecard. One of the judges had said, you guys started real strong with that Rad Frère Jacques song. And then you proceeded to play like different kind of stuff. Because at the time we were playing, you know, kind of like Pixies, Weezer type stuff, which wasn't in fashion. Because I think around this time in the 90s, it was like, you know, when you had like Limp Bizkit and like Korn and stuff. So everybody was either doing this like pseudo hip hop metal fusion stuff. And then we were kind of these weirdos doing like, you know, trying to sound like Pavement, you know, like, which just wasn't in fashion at the time. So anyhow, like they were kind of really critical of that because they were like, yeah, then it got kind of like slow and like boring, but that Frère Jacques song, man, you guys should keep that up. And I remember us like viewing that as like a point of pride. Like our joke was done so well, making fun, like parodying the stuff that was winning, that their judges liked that song. Like they were like, that's our jam, my dude. Anyhow, Dylan said it was my idiot generation that brought them back. Maybe we deserve our depression due to that sin. Well, one of the things I thought was weird that I've seen coming back, and we had a guest, friend of Artcasters, on friend of Scott Circlin's, named Gene Jimenez, right? He was one of the early adopters of digital coloring for comics. And not only that, he was the art director for GIJoe Jeans for like a good like decade almost. And what's funny is like I think even back when we had him on, you know, when he mentioned GIJoe jeans, he had to kind of explain it to people. Like, well, it was like these jeans that were like these really big pants, you know. And like he didn't have to explain it to us because we all experienced the era in time where everybody was wearing, you know, GIJoe like giant pants, you know. But what's funny is a couple years ago, well, not even a couple years ago, like about a year ago, when I was subbing, you know, I realized that a bunch of high schoolers now were wearing GIJoe jeans. And it was funny because I asked one of them, I was like, is that GIJoe jeans? And he was like, yeah. And he starts going off about it and like how much he loves GIJoe jeans and stuff, one of the students. And so I was like, hey, you know, my buddy like art directed GIJoe jeans. And he was like, oh, ask him about this like rare, like panda something, the pandas. Like there was like this, and I don't know, he knew like the whole history of this company and that there had been this release that's like some fabled release of, you know, GIJoe jeans with like a panda on them or something. So I texted, you know, Gene about it, and he's like, oh yeah, that was the rare whatever issue. We only ran like this many of them, because the kid was trying to ask if they existed or if it was like a myth. And he's like, yeah, those, you know, they were great, but they didn't like sell too well, so like they kept the run really small, but they were made. And so I like relayed that to this kid, and he was acting like I just talked to like the biggest rock star in the world. He's like, oh my gosh, can't believe you know the guy who art directed GIJoe jeans. And I was just thinking, what a weird thing, because like, you know, like a year before that, like GIJoe was just very outdated. And I don't mean that in a negative way. Like I think, you know, they were cool for the time, but they just were like a phase that had passed. And it's interesting to me getting to that age where you see those things like repeat, like the cycles of what's trendy. You know, that like the 90s are still like a big deal right now, you know, where I'm seeing a lot of kids, you know, rocking the flannels, you know, wearing Nirvana shirts, you know, talking very like highly of the 90s, you know. It reminds me of in the 90s how we used to talk about the 60s, you know. And I think the timeline kind of matches up there because it's about 30 years, you know. A little over 30 years, like 40 years have passed, you know? So I guess talking about the 90s is kind of equivalent to like when I was in high school, people talking about the 50s, which is trippy to think about. Anyhow. Okay, guys, we have shaded one of the figures. I tend to, with this, kind of start with the figures and then I'll kind of work my way to the backgrounds. I feel like I'm making okay time on this page. My son's at his friend's birthday party. That's pretty awesome. So he's had a fun 3-day weekend. You know, he got to go to, you know, a theme park and then go to his friend's birthday party. And I think they're going to Charlie Brown's, which is great. If you're ever in the Antelope Valley, actually, I will say this to Jim. Jim, if you ever come up and visit, we should go to Charlie Brown's. You and Leanne would love it. You would absolutely love it. It's like the weirdest, like, curio Americana, like, really good food, but, like, very strange, just, like, huge store of just, like, curios and nostalgia. Actually, we have a giant dinosaur head over our fireplace. And that store is where we got the giant dinosaur. Okay. All right. So Wilson's here. Again, the light's coming from like the top right. Dylan said, I must see that dinosaur head. I know it's in some videos on my YouTube channel. You'll have to like hunt back, but I think when I started my channel, I did film when I was doing more edited stuff and less live streams. I definitely did like a little. I showed the dinosaur. I would show it with my mobile webcam, except that I can't because my mobile webcam is torched. So I'm stuck with the stationary one. Okay, good. Okay, let's do this up here. And I want to have this kind of go down, get a little darker where there's a shadow. And then I want it to go real dark towards the bottom and the feet. Them feets. Yeah, I'm trying to think of like other things that have come back that were like really big when I was a kid. I definitely noticed at Universal Studios there's still a big hype for Back to the Future, which is great. Back to the Future was probably the biggest thing when I was a kid. There's a snap bracelets. Kids in elementary school are still rocking snap bracelets. That's interesting. Even at Universal Studios, like one of the things are these things called power bracelets, and they're just basically a snap bracelet. So that's interesting to see that survives. And I think I told you guys this, the cool S lives on at high schools. Like it's not dead. It still exists as a graffiti on the desk. The cool S still remains. I feel like that'll be the sign of the death. The full death of democracy will be when you don't see the cool S appear on a school desk. That's when you know everything's done. It's over at that point. Okay, we've been going for 2 hours. I'm going to put on another trailer, and then we're going to finish up this this page, just shading it. Ooh, man, stretching. All right. Here is, let's put on Kids Say Kemble.
You know, the Georgia kids say the craziest thing.
So, little Susie, do you have any brothers or sisters? I understand you're in 3rd grade. How do you like that? Do you like your teacher? You like to do a lot of fun things at school? You got any hobbies, Susie? Any things you like to do when you're not in school? I hear you like to read.
Well, right now I'm reading 2 stories written and illustrated by Joshua Kemble. It grapples with faith and mental illness. It's ultimately a story about redemption. It's a savage piece of writing. Also, I just finished up Jacob's Apartment, another one by Kemble. Jacob's Apartment weaves together elements of spiritualism and relationship dynamics, as well as atheism, and all the while it deals with abandonment and loyalty. It's a fierce read.
Do you like ponies?
All right. Another comeback from the 80s, Donald Trump. Okay, that's enough. No tangents. Hashtag. That's all I do on these live streams. We're just working, hanging out working on comics and just riffing. We're just jamming, bro. We're just jamming, man. Oh. Okay, there's a thing I need to look up at some point. This is a monsters thing, and I haven't seen this since I was a little kid. But when I was really little, The Wonderful World of Disney. Do you guys remember this? I don't even remember what channel it was on, but it was basically on, I think, every Sunday, from what I recall. This is back when we were living with my aunt, and my aunt was an old woman, and so her television would go pong when you turned it on, because you had to pull, like, it had a little like thing, and you'd pull it forward and it would go pong and then warm up. And then we, watch like reruns of Batman, like the TV series, or like Wonderful World of Disney would come on. And when the Wonderful World of Disney came on, it was awesome. They'd have like occasional times where they'd show like animators working behind the scenes, that kind of stuff. But I also remember they had this thing around Halloween where they'd play this series, and I have not even bothered to look this up online, and I should, called Bride of Boogedy and Mr. Boogedy. And I think it was a comedy, but I was like probably like maybe 4 or 5 at the time. And this show freaked me the heck out. Like, and I remember in the show, like if people said boogedy, like they'd say boogedy, boogedy, boogedy. And then Mr. Boogedy would appear, And I remember that being so absolutely horrifying to me as a kid that I remember not being able to watch it. Like my whole family would watch it, and then I would like try to watch it for like a few minutes, and then I'd like go like away into like my room and like hide. Like, and I remember having nightmares about it. I remember my sisters would be like, boogity, 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 to like mess with me. It's so funny, but like in retrospect, I think it was just a really good, like, I don't think it was a scary show at all. I think it was like really tongue in cheek, silly live action thing. And I think like the guy in it, I can't remember, but it was one of those guys, like the main actor in it was like one of those guys who was in like every, Wonderful World of Disney made for TV series things, But that was an interesting era in time too, where, you didn't have a glut of like everything available to you, Like I really want to see Shogun a lot. Like I think that would be really fun to watch, that TV series. And it's just like when? Like when are we going to watch it, My wife really wants to watch it too, and it's like, I don't know when we're going to ever have time, to watch that. I don't know when we'll have time to watch that show. That was my Jerry Seinfeld there. What's with time? Gary said Shogun is great. Yeah, it looks amazing. It looks like incredible and fascinating, right? So we'll have to try. But it's just, leisure time. I know this is a season in life, but, it's like I just changed careers. So I'm going to be, probably attending college full time on a full time schedule, as well as teaching full time, as well as working on this book. So I'm guessing the next few years, I'm just going to be like blinking and time will, disappear. But anyhow, like it was an interesting time back in the day where you had pretty limited options. If you were a kid, we'd watch reruns of like a lot of the classic like 60s and 70s shows, because there just wasn't much on, so like you'd kind of cling on to anything, animated, or anything that seemed like it would be cool for kids, so it's like I didn't know a lot of kids who didn't watch reruns of Batman, because it was like, what was that time of day where like that was the fun thing to watch for kids? Everything else was like adult stuff, or like Magnum PI was like a huge deal because it's like you had like 4 shows, competing. I don't know. It's an interesting era where it's like now I feel like there's kind of almost like a probably like way better quality of everything, but there's less of a like my kid will go to school and it's like it's funny, they do have trends, but it's like it's a little different than when I was in elementary school, where each kid kind of has their own like individualized interests, but there's always the overlying things. Like every kid Ben's age is obsessed with Roblox. All of them love Among Us, that game Among Us. There's like some common threads, but then it's like, even in the game Roblox, there's like a million different sub games within that game. So it gets more niched. All right, I got to disappear for a second. I'm going to put on another trailer. This one will be the Jacob's Apartment trailer. I'll be right back. Speak clearly, it seems that only in dreams can we these things we've seen and walk around breathing I don't know the part to play in this heart of mine. There's dissonant things, they split at the seams. Dylan said, I wonder why these two old games are so popular. My best guess is because they involve creativity of some form. Yeah, I think Minecraft is just like, I think it's the simplicity and it's kind of like digital Legos. You know what I mean? It's like of course it's going to be fun for kids because it's like a building platform. I know now Ben has been making like, yeah, I've shared these with like friends and stuff, but like he's been doing like animations and stuff with like apps on his iPad and designing like video games and stuff using apps. And like some of them are like incredible. Like it really blows my mind what he's able to do. And it makes me really excited because it's like, man, like it's less limited what kids can do with their creativity nowadays. So like as much as I get like dystopian about some stuff about the future, like that is really uniquely cool. The fact that like a kid my son's age can make like it, you know, if he wanted to, you can make a full motion picture. Like, and it's not like mildly like, you know, like, oh, the little kid with the video camera stuff. It's like they have access to like so much that, you know, it's interesting to me that he can design a game better than I could. And you know, he's 11, you know, like that to me is like, that's fascinating. Like that's going to be a really cool thing to see. What these creatives who have grown up, you know, with the iPad as like almost like it's just like, you know, a phone or like a simple, you know, utility. And because of that, like, I wonder how many people are going to make really out of the box, like fascinating, like things, you know, as time progresses. Like, I think we're going to see some really unique, like multi-platform kind of art where it's going to be games or movies that are just done in ways that we never could have even considered, you know, when we were kids. So that to me that's like the more optimistic end. I know like sometimes things can get really scary, you know, with AI and thinking about the future with maybe our government and things like that. But there are things where technological advancement has been really cool, and has opened up some really interesting things that I can't wait to kind of see. And at least with my son, you know, if he has that creative bug, I love that right now he's at an age where if he wants to build a video game, he can build a video game. Like, if he wants to animate something funny or interesting, he can make it. He can make it work. If he wants to do stop motion, he can do it real quick. It's like anything he wants is pretty cool. And I think that might be it. It might be Picasso. I can't remember. What's a Picasso tab though? Because that actually sounds really familiar. I can't remember the now I'm blanking out on the app that he uses to build games and stuff. Picasso sounds really familiar though, but it might just be because it's Picasso, you know. But I know he builds games and stuff now, so it's been really cool to see that that's a whole thing, you know. It's like a thing you can do. And it kind of reminds me of like stuff, you know, Jim talks about all the time, like where, you know, indie animation's so awesome because you can kind of create something from nothing, right? You can kind of create like an entire you can create an entire film, you know, without having to have a cast, right? It can just be the creator and the vision kind of coming forth from that. And I think that like that, I hope AI doesn't kill that, because that is one of the cool things about modern times and like and digital media is like that the gateways that prevented people from being able to make stuff and be creative are so much smaller than they used to be. And so what's cool is you can really create a vision that goes beyond anything, you know, I think most people would even have considered, because just, or they might have considered or dreamed of, but just never been able to have the tools to make those things a reality. Dylan said, I've mentioned it before on the Artcasters. It's a cheaper art tablet. Nice. Yeah, I can't remember the that sounds really similar though, but like there's a name to like this app he's been using to make animations and stuff. All right, so we'll save this. We're getting there, guys. We're getting there. And now I want to do the background. I'll start with the sky because I think the sky might be least limited. Need to merge this down with the... Okay, now we can probably do the sky. And then I'll do the ground, because that'll be the another quick kind of masked thing. And this is going to be color held, so I don't mind going a little dark as it gets towards the building. And then we're going to do the ground real quick. The ground's going to be really dark on this because it's going to be covered in a lot of shadows. I do want to say I really appreciate all you guys who've been showing up and hanging out while I'm working on art. It's very encouraging to have a crew working on this stuff. Dylan said, I'm unsure if I want to rebuy from them because I like my third one and it seems to be getting slightly more janky each time. Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I've never done the off-brand tablet. I remember back in the day, a lot of people were getting those Yanova tablets. That was kind of, for a while, that was a big competitor to Wacom. But then I know that Corey was really singing the praises of the. There's a new Wacom tablet that is like a much more affordable, screen tablet, and he said he liked it more than the iPad responsiveness. So, I'm kind of curious. I'm curious how that'll pan out. It'll be interesting to maybe test that out if I ever need to get one. I have a cheapo Wacom. My Wacom is super cheap. Pretty basic setup here. And what I found was where I used to work as an art director, they got me a screen tablet. And I remember using that at work, and then I ended up turning off the screen functionality because I can work quicker on a regular old Wacom or Wacom. Dylan said, no problem. I enjoy your live streams. Well, I enjoy your company, Dylan. So there we go. We all enjoy each other. And that is why we are friends. We are online friends. I don't know why I took on that voice, but I thought it was apropos somehow. Okay, let's get rid of this extra business. Oh, it's looking good. It's looking good. Looking good here. Okay. Okay, you guys. I can't wait to get into coloring this, which I'll probably be doing later today. But we haven't even finished shading it, so that would be important. Let's shade first. That's going to get real dark. Again, I'm imagining the shadow coming from top right when I'm doing this. Do. All right. Well, Gary said Shogun is good, so I think, Gary, I'm going to take you up on that. I think I'm going to convince my wife to watch Shogun episode 1. She is in a similar boat to me where she has 5 book deadlines and all of that stuff. But I'm going to be like, look, book deadline or not, we need to watch episode 1. Just 1 episode. And we will see if Gary Hodges is a truth teller or a liar with his pants on fire. And I'll get back to you, okay? But I tend to trust your judgment, so just know that my trust in your judgment hinges on whether you're telling the truth about Shogun. I'm kidding. No, Gary tend to have good taste, so. I even agree with Mr. Hodges about Star Wars. I think I'm less critical of some of the newer ones than he was, but I agree with him about The Last Jedi. I do. Dylan said just 1 episode. Sure, right. Well, that's the problem is if I do that, can we, This is the hard part about being a creative, actually. It really is. You get into being a creative because you like the stuff. Like, obviously, I like comics. I like entertainment. I wouldn't have probably gotten into this thing if it weren't for, like, loving the thing. But yeah, it is tough to be making the thing and also keeping up with the thing that you love and consuming it. It's a hard balance, right? You don't want to be just the guy who's consuming stuff. But also, you need to kind of get some of that fuel, right? Because otherwise, like, why are you even making the stuff? If you forget why you even liked it. So it's like a really hard balance. But yeah, I don't know. Now I'm wondering if I should go back on the Shogun thing, because maybe I don't have the time. Okay, let's see here. Want to do the doorway here. This will be the path to the doorway. I want it to overlap slightly. All right, we'll make another layer. Save. I want to get this spot behind her. Let's get these areas. Why doth thou liketh this? That was Doth thou know? I do think it would be fun to do an entire Artcasters as Shakespeareans. So I think I'm going to challenge, if Scott or Corey are watching this before or after the fact, my gauntlet laid down to you, kind sirs, is to do an entire episode in Shakespearean voice. Nay, shall we dare take on the slings and arrows of art casting in Shakespearean? I think we have to. We have to. Dylan was saying, I want that so bad. I want that to happen so bad. It has to. It would be funny. It'd be fun. Yea! Ye be watching thine Artcasters, in which betwixt your consumption of other entertainment structures, you shall peruse the great discussions of our time. It has to happen. Okay. Clap, clap. You know what would be funny is to do a panel after this where the lights go on because she clapped and then have it say, the clapper. I'm here all day, guys. I'm you can tell that I'm an artist and not a professional comic, okay? Let's just put it that way. Don't judge me because I'm funny. Okay, what do we got? We got to finish the door. The fun part is this is actually really the fun part on these things because it's starting to come together, you know? There's nothing more exciting than taking something that's kind of there and then getting it there. Dylan said, that was pretty funny. Thank you. Thank you. I try. Too hard. I try. Okay, here we go. We're going to put some of that there. And then let's do backgrounds here. These bigger areas are always like way easier to do the shading on. Okay. This needs to get super dark back here. Super, super dark. Like almost black. Okay. Yes. Now let's get the area behind her. And since I'm moving kind of quickly here, I should save. That's always good. Whenever you're working digitally, make sure you're hitting Command S a lot. The worst thing in the world that can ever happen, and it has happened to me and many artists, is if you're working and you forget to hit save and then you lose hours of work. It's a heartbreaking thing. It happens to us all, but it happens a lot less when you've had it happen once. Because once is all it takes to be like, crap, I got to hit save. All right, we're getting there. I am liking this page so far. I am liking this panel. Dylan said, sometimes I would speak Shakespearean to my mom and she would reply to me in Shakespearean. It was nice and funny. That's amazing. Mine value be laid betwixt these rooftops and buildings, in which shadow doth creepeth slowly. I think the other thing is the enunciation that like old time Shakespearean actors used to use. I think that's half the trick of doing it, is like, you have to speak like this. I always wonder who taught, like, does anyone talk like that in reality? Like, can you imagine if every time you talk to somebody, you talk to them with like projection in that way? Somebody be like, hey, how was your day? My day, 'twas a fulfillment of joy in which, like, you know what I mean? That kind of, I don't know. It's just, it'd be interesting if you met somebody who actually just talked like that, like with kind of strange enunciations. Yea, my day was good at work. We did work hard. And after working hard, we did rest. And betwixt the day we didst eateth of our food, our portion, which we had dealt ourselves the morning prior. I don't know, guys. You tell me what you think about a Shakespearean Kemble stream. Maybe that can happen. They wonder whether the Kemble shalt maintain thine voice upon this eve. And warily continue to the detriment of those listening in shame. Okay, guys. Yeah, Dylan was saying, imagine if it became your thing and you had to do it every video. That would be kind of funny to do that as a test. Like, would that work if you were just, hello, welcome to my YouTube story in which I will tell a tale so full of woe, thine eyes shalt rolleth in thine head. All right, guys. We're getting there, guys. We are getting there. Yea! What hearkens before me is a finished page. In future and on the stage. It has to happen, guys. It has to. It absolutely has to happen. I challengeth thee, O Circland of Scott. O Circland of Scott and Corey of Kerr. Thou shalt do thine Shakespearean projection challenge, in which we shall commence an entire episode upon Shakespearean recitation. Nay, do not denieth mine plea, but taketh up thine challenge, that shalt be lain down before thee. The Shakespearean challenge. It's going to happen. All right, guys. That is a shaded page. That's one shady page, all right? You see this? Done. That's how quick that happens. It starts, and then, a whole short 2.5 hours later, it's done. Let me merge all this shading down. Merge visibles. Merge visibly. And we're good to go. All right. Thanks to everybody who showed up on the stream, who's supported my stuff. I really appreciate it. I appreciate each one of you. Thanks to Dylan and Gary and Paul and Jim and everybody else who stopped by to say hello. And let me know in the comments whether you guys want to see a Shakespearean episode of the Artcasters, whether Scott and Corey should take on that challenge. I will see you guys on the next live stream, probably today, because I do plan on coloring this sucker. So have a good one. I will see you guys on the next live stream. If you haven't yet, hit subscribe, hit the bell so you get notifications. And thanks for keeping me company. And you guys are awesome. All right, have a good one. Bye. Dylan said it's looking good. We demandeth thee. We lay down a challenge so divine, laid down at the shrine of your mind, in which you shall take on such absurd challenge that fate itself will pull apart like the strings of ire. Okay, anyhow. All right, guys, have a good one. Bye. See you.